This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson. Yes, welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. I am your host, Harry Wilkinson, and we are here to talk about the days and weeks events, happenings in the news, happenings in politics, happenings internationally, happenings in the worlds of entertainment, technology, science, and we're here to talk about them all and look at them from a higher perspective, from a spiritual perspective. And usually at the beginning of this, I explain to listeners who may be new to this program what I mean by a higher perspective, what I mean by a spiritual perspective. And I will give some brief attention to that today. However, we have so much to get to today. It's a special day. It's a day of remembrance for one very special man who we have highlighted on this show several times as a hero of consciousness. And so we're going to talk quite a bit about him, and we're going to get back to also our discussion, which we've been having the last 2 weeks about economics, money, and the transition era, and how this new mysterious planet 9 that is on astronomers' radar now is, to some people's minds, a herald of some of these changes that we've been talking about. So just by listening to what I'm about to talk about, I gather that if you're new to this program, you'll kind of get an idea of what it's all about. Basically, this show is a way of looking at the world around us that I think is particularly healthful. That's why it's also, I consider it a wellness program. And it's healthful because we are able to take a step back from things in the world that maybe push our buttons a little too much, because we believe they're actually happening to us, rather than being illusions that we create at the very highest level of our being, at the very highest metaphysical level. We are creating this sort of illusory hologram in which we participate in all kinds of exciting things, adventure, loss, fear, all of these things that at our highest level we don't experience because they're not truth, they're not real. But we can experience them by creating ourselves in a smaller fashion, in a smaller version, in which we appear to ourselves to be vulnerable, to be frightened, or to be at the mercy of others, or to be a conqueror, or any of these other ideas that we have about ourselves. And we do it deliberately to have these sort of experiences. But we're also aware at the deepest, many people are not, but my belief is that at the deepest level, we're all aware that this is not reality. This is not the truth of what is. And I think we all have an inkling of that. And I think we get more of an inkling of that when we go into our dreams. If you do meditation, you may also experience those moments where you realize, you know what, there's something a lot more going on here. So that's my perspective on this. The other thing you'll hear me harangue, I hope I'm not haranguing it, but I do believe it's a point that needs to be made over and over and over again, because people just don't, there's a certain inertia around this concept of the interchangeability between spirituality and religion. And what I continue to say on this show is that the two are not interchangeable, and not only are they not interchangeable, they often are working at cross purposes to one another. Religions, particularly organized religions, particularly some of the newer, older ones, the desert religions, I call them, the ones, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, are institutions that have their own rules and regulations and dogma, and those that do not follow them, those that do not, believe in the way that the church tells them to believe, are excluded. So spirituality is not exclusionary. It's not limited to a select few who get blessings from on high from certain religious figures. Spirituality is part of everybody's everyday existence. We all have a spiritual nature. Now, many people have, disagreed with me on that, but quite frankly, just from a scientific point of view, there's evidence that says that everybody has a spiritual nature. It's called the VMAT2 gene. It's in our DNA. It's what makes us have experiences of expansion and transformation, and prayer and meditation. And for some, that gene has a stronger mutation apparently than others. There's still a lot of research being done on it. But the fact of the matter is, we all have a spiritual nature. We all have a sense of something that goes beyond just our physical senses. Now, what we do with that is entirely up to ourselves. We can parlay that into, religious belief. We can turn that over to a religious organization because we're more comfortable with them handling it than we are handling it ourselves, because it is quite powerful and perhaps confusing and perhaps overwhelming. So there's a great sense of perhaps safety and or security in having another institution, sort of tell you what it's all about, take it over, and so you don't have to worry about it, you don't have to think about it. All you have to do is listen to what they tell you and follow those rules. And for some people, that's enough. That's what they need. For others, they don't accept it at all. They deny their spiritual nature and find it something akin to a fairy tale or just imagination or something along those lines. So there's that way of dealing with it, and then you can also have people who, in varying ways, incorporate their spirituality, live their spirituality in their lives, in, as I said, varying ways, whether that be through, a practice of certain New Age ideas, whether it be through meditation, whether it be just through prayer, or whether it just be through sort of a humanism, something I would call transhumanism, where we see the beauty and the energy and the amazingness of life, and we know that we're part of something bigger. That's spirituality too. So okay, now I spent a lot longer than I wanted to on this. Once I get going, it's hard for me to stop. But in any case, before we get to the continuing discussion of our changing economics and this new Planet 9, interestingly enough, and this it's so amazing how things sort of dovetail and interconnect. Synchronicity, perhaps. But upon this discovery of this amazing and mysterious new planet, we see the passing of Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Mitchell was an astronaut, the sixth man on the moon. and also the founder of Noetics, a research organization dedicated to uh, scientific research on areas of psychic phenomena, UFOs, uh, intuition, all of these things that traditional science has been very, dismissive of, to say the least. His Noetics Institute has contributed to a large body of solid scientific evidence regarding these areas, including, as I said, psychic ability, um, and intuition, and what's the term I'm looking for? I'll come back to that, but let me just talk about Edgar Mitchell for a bit. He apparently passed away at a hospice in West Palm Beach, Florida. And he passed away on February 4th, one day before the 45th anniversary of his moon landing. One day before. It really is amazing. If you look at the details of people's deaths, and this is something I've said on the program before, and it's also something that I believe, I can't remember who was writing about that, but at the highest level of our beings, again, that metaphysical level that I talk about, where we're creating all of these things, we also create the moment of our death. We create when we pass, and we create how we pass, and we do it to send a message to others, I believe. So, anyway, one day before the 45th anniversary of his moon landing, Captain Mitchell passed away. He was part of the Apollo 14 mission in 1971 and was on the moon for more than 9 hours conducting experiments. But that experiment, the moon experiments, weren't the biggest experiment in his life. The biggest experiment in his life was the epiphany that he experienced while actually returning home from the moon. So let me explain what happened. He was fascinated by understanding the nature of consciousness. So while he was in space, he involved himself in an experiment in which something was triggered. As he gazed at the Earth, floating in the vastness of space, and contemplated the history and hopes of humankind on that lonely blue sphere, he was engulfed by a profound sense of universal connectedness. I realized that the story of ourselves as told by science, our cosmology, our religion, was incomplete and likely flawed. I recognized that the Newtonian idea of separate, independent, discrete things in the universe wasn't a fully accurate description. What was needed was a new story of who we are and what we are capable of becoming. That moment was an epiphany for Mitchell. As an accomplished scientist and engineer, he had grown accustomed to directing his attention to the objective world out there, but the experience that came to him while hurtling through space was profound. My understanding of the distinct separateness and relative independence of movement of those cosmic bodies was shattered. I was overwhelmed with the sensation of physically and mentally extending out into the cosmos. The restraints and boundaries of flesh and bone fell away. I wondered if Stu and Alan, those are the other astronauts that went with him on Apollo 14, were experiencing it as well. Somehow I never felt the urge to ask. Interesting. So the experience led him to a startling hypothesis. Perhaps reality is more complex, subtle, and inexorably mysterious than conventional science had led him to believe. Gee, you think? Perhaps a deeper understanding of consciousness could lead to a new and expanded view of reality in which objective and subjective, outer and inner, are understood as complementary aspects of the miracle and mystery of being. And by the way, I'm reading this. This is an in memoriam on the noetic.org website, the website of his organization, written by Cassandra Vieten, who is a major member of the Noetic Society. So consider that this was happening in 1971. This is what he's saying in 1971. This is what he's realizing some 45 years ago. Consider what we now know from quantum physics. What we now know from quantum physics is that the Newtonian idea of separate, independent, discrete things in the universe isn't fully accurate. That has been proven. But that wasn't out there in 1971, at least not, broadly in the public mind. So, that realization is what led Edgar Mitchell to create the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And it was troubling to him that the dualistic worldview, as they say here, separates mind and matter. That mind is one thing, matter is another, and they don't have much to do with one another. And then, just as he's creating this, quantum physics takes leaps forward in challenging this dualistic worldview with experiments at the subatomic level, where one particle of matter will respond when something happens to another particle, even though the two are separated from each other by distance and space. So Edgar believed that awareness might be in our subatomic particles. And he proposed that awareness can evolve through many levels of complexity, and that at an advanced stage of complexity, say at the human level, an aptitude for self-reflective awareness begins to emerge. And that includes the capacity to make conscious choices and help be held accountable for how actions affect others, and so on. So the Noetics Society, Institute of Noetic Sciences, was, of course, inspired by this vision, and continues to do quite a bit of scientific inquiry into all of these areas. As it says here in this article, our work helped to transform mind-body medicine from a fringe idea into a vital component of virtually all major medical centers in the United States, and increasingly worldwide. Our original research on the benefits of meditation and compassion sparked the development of new scientific methods and insights into how we can cultivate our highest potentials. Our pioneering scientific work on interconnectedness through time and space has challenged traditional notions of the nature of reality and is now making its way into mainstream physics. Our frontier research into perennial mysteries, including precognition, life after death, the role of intention in healing, and transformative experiences continues to broaden the range of acceptable topics for scientific inquiry. IONS, that's the Institute of Noetic Sciences, continues to expand the boundaries of our understanding of ourselves and of reality. So as I say, I think it's an amazing message that just as this Planet 9 is emerging, challenging us to believe in it even though we don't actually see it, but we can know of its presence, that this pioneering hero of consciousness makes his transition. Fascinating. Okay. Let's move on then. We'll talk about what we have been talking about the past couple of weeks, which is our economic situation. Now, last week and then the week before, I introduced you to an article by an astrologer named John Keener, who talked about this Planet 9 and how he felt, along with many other astrologers apparently, that it was a harbinger of many positive changes, including economics. And this is coming at a time when, our finances, our stock market has been incredibly turbulent, and once again, economists are talking about a recession being in the works. I mentioned that this is not by any means unexpected by many people, including talk show host Thom Hartmann, who wrote a book called The Crash of 2016, in which he goes into great detail about how and why these things are happening. And he's got a lot of really good points in that book. But the book I'm looking at right now and want to introduce you to, in fact, I talked about this, but it's been quite a few years. And really, not since we were coming out of the last recession. But this book is called Sacred Economics, Money, Gift, and Society in the age of, I can't forget the rest of it, but it's called Sacred Economics by Charles Eisenstein. Basically, what Charles puts out there is that our economy is evolving spiritually in the same way that we are, and that what we have previously linked to being, of value economically will change. What we hold sacred, what he calls the sacred commons, things such as, our environment and our emotional and mental health and all of these things, those will be the things that are the basis of economic value. But what he spent a lot of time talking about, and I mentioned this last week and the week before, is the idea of negative interest money. Now, keep in mind, when he was writing this, it was certainly an idea that economists had talked about and had. It wasn't a very popular idea, but no one was doing it. Now, years later, the European Central Bank now has negative interest rates, and just last week, Bank of Japan announced that they would be having the same kind of thing, negative interest money. So what does it mean? Well, negative interest money, according to Charles Eisenstein, backed by things that are sacred in an ecological economy, turns the intuitions of the age of usury on their head. The age of usury means the age of, utility. So he says this is utterly revolutionary, fundamentally altering the human experience. And the transformation reverberates across all levels. So our current social agreement and the idea of what money is, he sums up as thou shalt issue money only to those who will earn more of it. Ultimately, it comes down to participating in the expansion of the realm of goods and services. In other words, growth. You have to find more goods and services to sell, and we get those goods and services out of the commons. These goods and services are things that normally we do or had done in the past for free. For instance, childcare has become a marketable commodity, whereas before it was something that families did and neighbors did for each other. Now we no longer do that, so we have to pay someone in many cases to do it. So that's the idea when he says, selling things from the commons. So he says society's energy is directed toward that which will expand the realm of money and property, the human realm, the owned realm. And he says this is part of the ascent of humanity towards dominion over nature. That's where we've been going. So lowering interest rates below the zero lower bound makes investments possible that have a zero or negative return on capital. Now, of course, that sounds rather counterintuitive when you're coming from the point of view that he just described. But that's only because our intuitions have been so conditioned by this culture of growth. We can barely conceive of the possibility of another function of money or of a business model not dependent on profit. Now, can you imagine that? A business model not dependent on profit. And by this, we're not talking about nonprofit companies, because even nonprofit companies make a profit. They just don't make as much of a profit. And they are considered to be, some special breed, not ordinary, business practice. So now he gives this example. I really like this example, so I'll read it to you. It's imagine you go to a bank and say, I'd like to borrow money for my business. Here is my business plan. See, if you lend me $1 million, I will earn $900,000 in 4 years' time. So I'd like you to lend me the $1 million at negative interest, and I'll pay you back $900,000 in installments over 4 years. And then the bank says, we love your business plan. Here's your money. Now, why would they agree? Well, the way things are now, of course, that would be, impossible. They'd feel they were losing money. But with a negative interest rate, what happens? That $1 million, if they left it as cash and didn't lend it out, that would depreciate at an even higher rate. So he estimates about 7%. So that after 4 years, it would only be worth about $740,000. So the bank would actually make money by lending it to this business and getting paid back $900,000. They are making more money than they would if they just held on to that money. Whereas interest promotes the discounting of future cash flows, demurrage, or this negative interest rate, encourages long-term thinking. So in other words, the way things are now, if there's a forest that generates $1 million a year sustainably without destroying the forest, and they can generate that forever, but the way that our economic model is built, it's more valuable if that forest is cleared out and an immediate profit of $50 million is given. And so that seems rather short-sighted when you think about it. But that's the way our economy has been built, and that's why we are in such dire straits these days as far as the economy is concerned. And I believe it all ties in with this sort of apocalyptic concept that we have. If we felt that we were going to be able to continue living, or the world was going to continue, you would do things like sustainable forests that generate $1 million every year for the rest of, of eternity. But if you think that, the world's going to end in 10 years, then that's no longer a very sound policy. So I think it's all tied into this idea. And I think it really started to ramp up somewhere in the 80s, where businesses became less about long term and more about let's get as much as we can as soon as we can because we don't know what's going to happen. And that's all fear-based. But you know what? I think we'll talk more about this next week in our next show. Maybe we'll do a little discussion on apocalyptic thinking, because I think that's also part of the transition era we're in. So hopefully you can tune in next week and we'll talk about that. In the meantime,